In this video, we are going to talk about the old and new world order, focusing on their main aspects in a direct and objective way. And the best part is, it's illustrated so you can understand everything clearly and without complications. So let's get into the video. Hey everyone, I'm Paolo, your geography teacher. It's always an honor to have you on Geoillustrata. So without further delay, let's get straight to the video. No time wasted, just like it's always done here on the channel. And our topic today is the New World Order. And as a result, we'll also talk about the so-called Old World Order, all right? But to start things off, let's talk about what a world order actually means, right? After all, what is that? Well, to put it simply, we can say that a world order refers to the general setup of hierarchies. Hierarchy of power on a global level at a certain point in history. In other words, it will involve power struggles, spheres of influence, commercial and economic disputes. This involves the world's major powers during a certain period. And look, it's also very important for you to know that these world orders are not unchangeable. They can change over time. In other words, a country considered a great power can gradually lose that strength, thus changing the hierarchies of power on a global level. All right, but you clicked on this video to understand a little more about the New World Order. However, by saying there's a new one, it implies that there was an old one. And we need to start the video by talking about it, the Old World Order. And that's pretty simple, okay? Pay attention. After World War II, which happened between 1939 and 1945, we have a very weakened Europe. That's because of the consequences of World War II and their direct involvement in the conflicts. This made them come out very weakened. As a result, they lost part of their influence and power on a global level. Within this context, after such a turbulent period, we have the emergence of two major global powers. And you know which ones they are. Yes, that's right. The United States and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, thus inaugurating a new historical moment, known as, you also know, that's right, the Cold War. So everyone, pay close attention. This is the historical moment we are referring to when we talk about the Old World Order. That is the period of the Cold War, marked mainly, this is very important, by the so-called bipolar world. In other words, there were two poles of power, one capitalist led by the United States, and the other socialist led by the Soviet Union. So, what these two great powers sought was to expand their sphere of influence on a global level. This included political, military, and economic matters. So much so that, during this period, there was the so-called space race, when these two great powers tried to send a man to the moon first, and also the arms race. This was with the intention of showing strength and power to their enemies. So they ended up arming themselves to the teeth, even using nuclear technology, in other words, nuclear weapons, which have devastating destructive power, as you well know. Pretty chill, right? Now let's move on, finally, to the New World Order. But just to give some context, in November 1989, we have the fall of the Berlin Wall, which without a doubt is the main milestone marking the end of the Cold War, representing the collapse of the Soviet Union. And this would mark the restructuring of global power, leaving researchers and political scientists on edge, right? Trying to understand what things would be like from then on. And that's how the so-called New World Order begins. Let's talk a little more in depth about it now. But before that, a quick message. If you want a mind map of this video, as well as all the other videos on the channel, check out our Geoillustrata mind map kit. I took all the videos from the channel and turned them into mind maps. This is to make your studies easier and more organized. I set a friendly price of $49.90, all right? I don't know how long I'll keep it at this price, so I'm leaving the link here in the video description. Go check it out. Oh, and if it makes sense for you, go ahead and get it. That way, you'll be boosting your studies. Plus, of course, you'll be supporting this channel that helps you so much. So, without further ado, let's get to the final part of the video. Well, after all, what will the new power structure look like after the Cold War? In other words, during the so-called New World Order. The first point is that, as I said, the United States will stand out as the main world power, both in economic and military terms. However, we will also have other economic centers, such as the European Union, Japan, and also China, which was already beginning to show signs of an economy with great growth potential. So, my friends, take a good look. If we look at it from an economic point of view, the New World Order will be marked by multipolarity. In other words, many centers of power. However, if we think from a military standpoint, The United States will be far ahead of the other powers, even though some of them also have great military power, like Russia, for example. But even so, it won't compare to the military strength that the United States has. And from this point of view, we're talking about a unipolar world. And which pole is that? That's right, the United States. And that's why the New World Order will also be characterized as uni-multipolar. The multi refers to economic issues and the uni to military matters. Pretty straightforward, right? But hang in there. We're almost done, okay? Now let's talk about some of the main characteristics of the New World Order. I picked out three, okay? And the first one is globalization, which will involve greater integration among countries, thus creating what's called a world without borders, in which different parts of the world connect through new information networks, mainly made possible by the advent and popularization of the internet. If you want to know a little more about globalization, watch this video I left linked above and also in the video description, all right? The second characteristic is the internationalization of markets, where large companies set up in different parts of the world. Of course, they're looking for locational advantages, such as lower labor costs, tax exemptions, new consumer markets, among other factors. That's exactly what the New World Order looks like, folks, even though a certain orange man is trying to put an end to it. And the third characteristic is the formation of economic blocs. Among them, we can mention the European Union, Mercosur, and NAFTA, which in short seek to increase cooperation and economic integration among themselves, thus promoting the economic development of both. Another aspect that we cannot neglect within the New World Order is the BRICS. That is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Listed as emerging countries, right? Countries with great potential for economic development. That was back in the early 2000s, right? Currently, within the BRICS, China has really stood out and established itself as one of the world's great powers, right? At the time this video was recorded, the second largest in the world, even managing to stand up to the all-powerful United States, right? This has been bothering the gentleman mentioned in the video quite a bit. And now coming to the end, I promise, we're really getting to the end. Just look at the video timer. Let's talk about regional divisions in the Old and New World Order. In the Old Order, there was a clear division between East and West. The West was led by the United States, and the East was led by the Soviet Union, even though this division had its exceptions. Like Cuba, for example, located in the West but allied with the Soviet Union. In the New World Order, this changes and the division becomes North and South. And here, the central criterion is the economy, with the countries of the North being notably more developed than the countries of the South, with the exception of Australia, which is even included within this criterion as a country of the North, right? That's why there's that little curve in the line, as you can see on the map. I'm leaving videos on the screen about globalization and the BRICS to complement what you learned here. Thanks for watching until the end. Please like the video. Also check out our Geo Illustrata mind map kits here. See you next time. Bye. See you.